You're with the Sound of Ideas from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Stephanie Haney. Thank you for staying with us. Last week, there were a number of historic wins in the November election, including 2 women elected governor in New Jersey and Virginia, bringing the total of women leading states in the U.S. at the same time to 14, which is a record high. Other major wins included the first Muslim woman elected to statewide office in the U.S. in Virginia, and the first Muslim elected mayor in New York City, as well as the first woman elected mayor of Detroit. All were major wins for the Democratic Party. Next year, there are 2 major candidates running for Ohio governor that would also make history if they won. On the Republican side, the leading candidate endorsed by the Ohio Republican Party and President Donald Trump. He's an entrepreneur and former presidential candidate, Vivek Ramaswamy. He is of Indian descent. And on the Democratic side, the only declared candidate so far is Dr. Amy Acton, a physician who served as the former Ohio Department of Health director and would be the first woman elected governor. We reached out to both of these candidates to discuss lessons learned from last week's election and the race ahead. We recorded a conversation with Dr. Amy Acton on Monday, which you are about to hear. We're still in conversation with Ramaswamy's campaign, hoping to secure an interview soon, and we will keep you posted on that. Now, since this conversation was pre-recorded, we can't take your calls, but we do encourage you to email us your thoughts at soi@ideastream.org, and you can also send us a message on Instagram at The Sound of Ideas. Here's my conversation now with Dr. Acton. Dr. Acton, what is it that you take away from what happened in this November election when we saw 2 Democratic women making history? That was in Virginia and New Jersey with those governor wins.
Right. Well, it was an historic night. It was exciting to watch not just these amazing 2 women governors be elected, but also locally. I was spending election night in Cincinnati. I'd spent the day going to different poll locations and finally wrapped up in the headquarters when Aftab won, Mayor Aftab Prevail. And I can tell you that what I was hearing all night were school boards were flipping in directions that people were thrilled about. I heard the same thing in Youngstown and other parts of the state. I think a lot of folks are ready for change, and they want to see public servants again, people who actually solve problems instead of making them.
In Virginia and New Jersey, both of those women won in blue or purple leaning states. Now, Ohio has been trending redder and redder. So what is it about the state right now that makes you see a path to winning the governorship in Ohio? Since Virginia and New Jersey, those electorates are a lot different than ours.
You know, actually, I've been going everywhere around Ohio for almost 2 years now, listening deeply everywhere I go. And we've been seeing record crowds of folks, and it doesn't know party. I can't say this enough. Ohio is a very independent thinking state. We actually have very high numbers of independents. And that's why you see something like Obama win, then Trump win. And what I am actually hearing from people on the ground, and that's what I think we saw in these more local elections in Ohio on last Tuesday, is that people are wanting change. You know, people are overwhelmed from the chaos and the vitriol and all the things that we've been seeing going on. And they're really wondering why no one is dealing with costs and affordability and the issues they face in their everyday life. You know, Ohioans are talking about things like what you and I probably feel, our energy bills going up. They're talking about gas and groceries, but they're talking about childcare and housing being affordable and being able to age in place with dignity. You know, I see Ohio, you know, obviously we've been very gerrymandered, so we have this sense that we're this very divided state. But when I'm on the ground, I'm seeing a lot of Ohioans probably speaking mostly of the same things.
When we do think about party identity, though, you know, you're running as the Democratic candidate, right now the only person declared in the Democratic side of things. Is there something different than you do to try to appeal to the Republican and the independent identified voters, or is it the same?
Well, I would say I'm running the same way I would always run and solve problems. You know, I'm a doctor. I'm not a lifelong politician. I'm certainly not a pundit on all of the things that have happened in our state. But I know Ohioans a little differently. A bond formed from something we went through together, and that bond doesn't seem to know party. What I'm seeing are everyday Ohioans longing for public servants, again, who actually do the work and make our lives better.
Let's talk about that bond. You know, you came to a lot of people's attention in your role as the director of
Yes.
Ohio Department of Health during the pandemic. And, you know, a lot of people found you to be a steady voice during that time. And since that time, we have seen a lot of backlash and skepticism about mask and vaccine mandates, especially from people on the right. So what do you say to voters who may have soured on the medical establishment in the years since then?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you that that is not what I'm hearing on the ground. Again, we keep seeing these record crowds of folks showing up. And, you know, what we talk about is, you know, specifically to COVID, you know, I'm very proud of what happened in the state. I was part of the early emergency response, and, you know, we put people and lives and getting people back to their lives and jobs above politics. And I'm very proud to have been a part of that. You know, Ohioans, we flattened the curve in Ohio. We saved a lot of lives, and we actually opened and got back to life a lot quicker because we took swift and decisive action. You know, as a leader, you know, the way I lead is a little bit, you know, something I've done my whole career, which is I put the hard cards on the table. And I think it's so important. The kinds of problems we're facing, whether it be property taxes or housing, takes being able to know the ground you stand on. I very much trust Ohioans, and I think they really trusted me because I put the hard cards on the table and asked a little more of us. You know, that's what's going to take to lead our state. We're going backwards on nearly every measure. I'm running because people in this state are struggling. They're doing everything right, but special interests and bad actors in our state house keep taking us backwards on every measure in the state. And what I see is people need leaders who are going to bring about change and address the issues we really care about.
Let's bring it back to present day now in the November election. You know, Abigail Spanberger will be Virginia's first female governor, also flipped Virginia from a Republican governor to a Democratic one. And there's an AP voter poll recently that said 40% of registered voters in New Jersey and Virginia said they cast their ballots in opposition to President Trump. So how much do you think this election and next year's will be decided by what happens on a federal level?
You know, I am very, very laser focused on Ohio and our state house. I keep telling folks, you know, we pay attention to federal, we pay attention to local, but the state house is where a lot of the bad things are happening. And until we fix our state and get good leaders, and they're good leaders, quite frankly, on both sides of the aisle, who are really there to do the work of the people, it doesn't get better for Ohio. Now, you know, my opponent, you know, very much I feel has no sense of these everyday issues we're facing, you know, about costs, about affordability, about, you know, our educational system in this state. And I know the president just said something like costs are not the issue, but I can tell you from what I'm hearing from Ohioans, absolutely affordability is the number one issue facing Ohioans. And we need leaders who are going to do something about it. And, you know, I'm running against an opponent who said recklessly, like, eliminate all property taxes. But we all know that property taxes have gone up because our state house has been failing us. They cut the local funds. They've cut funding our food banks, our mental health programs, you know, our addiction services. They've cut so many things. And then therefore the local community has had to raise revenue somehow. We actually have to do a comprehensive look at our entire tax policy, and we have to give immediate relief to people with things like the Homestead Exemption Act right now, because we have people aging in the homes they've been in their whole lives, and they just can't keep up. You know, just last week I was in Portage County at a food bank. We had 400 cars come through a food bank, and 65 cars were still waiting, and we ran out of food. We have immediate needs of folks. People are feeling this. This is real. You know, I had a really rough childhood. I've lived a lot of these issues of not having enough to eat, of living in a tent in the winter, of not having the heat turned on. And I understand what this is like. And what I'm up against is a self-funding billionaire who wants to do the same failed policies that have hurt the state for so long. So I'm laser focused on the people of Ohio, and I'm laser focused on this opponent because we really look like we can win this race and start to turn things around.
Now, when you reference your opponent there, you're talking about Vivek Ramaswamy.
Yes.
He is the person who has been endorsed by the Ohio Republican Party as the main candidate who's running on the Republican side. Right now, we are working to secure an interview with Vivek Ramaswamy as well. But right now, you're the only declared Democratic candidate for Ohio governor.
That's right.
So how does that impact your approach to your campaign leading up to the primary in 2026?
You know, I've been laser focused on people. And I can't say enough. I really believe what we're seeing now is people finding their way back to one another, not giving up on one another, and really trying to join arms to push back on these extreme ideologies and special interests and culture wars and all the rest of it that my opponent was very famous running for president on. You know, I've been focused on things like victims. You know, we challenged our opponent to come out and do what he said he would do in the Epstein files. He said he would release them when he was running for president. He's been silent. And I would hope you and others ask him questions about the fact that he won't speak up about that now. You know, as somebody, again, who experienced abuse and neglect as a child and experienced this kind of abuse specifically, I've been fighting for victims my whole life. I think folks like this need to be accountable. If you're not going to stand up for the victims of the most heinous crimes we see, you're certainly not going to stand up against special interests for the rest of us.
Sticking with talking about candidate Ramaswamy right now, who previously ran for president, as you mentioned, and worked shortly with the Trump administration's DOJ department. Following the GOP governor losses in New Jersey and Virginia, he mentioned Zohran Mamdani's win as mayor in New York City. He said it provided two key lessons for the Republican Party. First, that Republicans need to focus on affordability, and second, that Republicans need to cut out identity politics and emphasize that Republicans don't care about the color of your skin or your religion. So what do you think about that approach from Ramaswamy?
Well, as somebody who has been running for 2 years, focused on the needs of Ohioans, I don't find it credible that he is saying this as somebody who literally ran a presidential campaign based on culture wars and pitting people against one another. I can't tell you enough. Everywhere I go, people are exhausted. That's why we're seeing the record numbers, and the polling is absolutely showing that we are far ahead of my opponent in independents, and we're seeing a lot of Republicans crossing over because they too have been listening to his words all these years, and they too know that he is actually doing the same failed policies and promoting the same things that actually got us in this mess. So I think, you know, I'm laser focused truly, and having experienced costs, you know, to say that you care about costs and then spend most of the last year in other states actually with the opponents of the two governors who ran, he looks more like someone who's running for president. He's flying around in a private jet. You know, the cost of that a month is more than most of us make in a year in Ohio. And so I think it's very, very important that folks listen deeply to the people of this state. We've been going everywhere. We've been going places people, quite frankly, haven't been in a while. And that's why we're seeing these crowds that don't know party. I think people are longing for change. And when I say public servants again, you know, I can't say enough. Our job doing this, being governor, is to be for all people. It's to help all people feel safe. It's to help all people have a chance at a good life. My opponent literally took $10 million into a PAC from a guy named Yas in Philadelphia, whose sole goal is to end public schools as we know it. Everywhere I go in Ohio, people are very alarmed. They want to see their public schools thrive. We invented public schools in Ohio. It was a compact. The state was going to be different. In the Northwest Territory, when we chopped up the blocks of land, every so many was for public school, because unlike the East Coast, unlike Europe, we were going to make sure everyone had that chance at an education. And literally, we still haven't funded the bipartisan funding plan. My opponent has said literally out loud that he wants to end teachers' unions. I was saved by public schools as a kid. I have the life I have, was able to overcome a lot because of our schools and our libraries. I'm married to a 43-year public school, elementary school teacher and a coach. I don't think this is the kind of policy Ohioans want, and that's why I'm running for governor. I refuse to look the other way while bad actors keep selling us more of these failed policies.
You mentioned the importance of the state house when it comes to what we pay attention to. You know, we pay attention to the federal level, you say, and also the local level, but there's some bad things that are happening at the state level. So You're going to be working with many of the leaders that you're fighting against right now.
Right.
There is a majority of Republican power in the Ohio legislature. So how do you do that when you're working against that supermajority if you become governor?
Well, I've been doing this work my entire career. I'm almost 60 years old. I've worked with past governors as well. And obviously, I was willing to work with a Republican governor. You never agree with anyone on every issue, but I'll work with anyone who wants to actually solve the problems of Ohioans. I worked with this president. I worked on uranium leaking in Piketon, Ohio. I worked with this legislature on a number of issues, so much so that even while they were pushing back on some things during COVID, I was receiving well wishes and notes and flowers from people. The thing is, we're going to have to work, and we've got a lot of work to do. Winning is just the beginning of the task ahead. We didn't get here overnight. You know, we have to go after gerrymandering. I think 80% of Ohioans want to end gerrymandering. This was lawless language written last time. I worked with Maureen O'Connor and a bipartisan group of business leaders all over Ohio to end this. We have to go after it in 27 again. If we don't get it there, we go after it in the regular process, because these special interests are having such an influence on state houses. We need good people who want to serve and actually solve the problems of Ohioans back in. And that doesn't know party. It's about people who actually want to do the work.
When you talk about the issues that you're fighting against that have come to fruition here in Ohio because of the longstanding Republican leadership, what are those issues specifically? What are your top priorities?
You know, my priorities are, of course, healthcare being affordable. Right now, in many parts of our state, you have to go an hour and 15 minutes to deliver a baby, to have a cavity filled for your kid. Our rural hospitals are collapsing. Our urban here, right here in Cleveland, Metro Health is struggling right now. These Medicaid cuts, we need governors pushing back on that. But governors on both sides of the aisle are doing things like relieving medical debt, which is the largest cause of bankruptcy. Many folks struggle with the fact that one illness can wipe out everything that you have. You know, schools are be something you'll absolutely see me fighting for. Most parts of the state only have public schools. It's the center of the way of life. It is where healthcare and other things are happening, mental health for children right now. The economy, I absolutely believe that we could do a much better job of diversifying our economy. The State House has not worked on any of the cost issues that we care about. They didn't work on getting ahead of the new power electric grid thing that we're dealing with right now. We've had a very corrupt PUCO. They're not getting ahead of the corruption and promoting the Consumers Council. We're not actually making the AI companies bringing the big data centers in to make sure that they pay for this electricity, not the consumers, we the people of Ohio. But the thing is, they don't work on any of this stuff because they say they're working on the economy. But our growth in GDP in Ohio is 45th. Our unemployment is 45th right now, and our biggest export is young people. And these culture wars they're doing is absolutely adding to this. We actually need to realize that trickle-down economics doesn't work. It's been disproven by economists worldwide that economies are actually built from communities up. We need to be empowering our communities, our local communities again, instead of doing everything we can to make their job harder.
Looking ahead to next year's election, you know, last year, Sherrod Brown lost in the Senate race to Bernie Moreno. He's running again for the U.S. Senate again. So what does that mean to your campaign to have a recognizable Democratic face on the ballot? Have there been any conversations there? Will you be working together at all to get the Democratic vote out?
You know, everywhere I go, I've been very focused on people, and people are hungry for change. I think what we saw in the two state elections here in Ohio, not in Virginia or New Jersey or anywhere else, but here in Ohio, were a very good sign of what is to come. You know, everywhere I've been in Cincy, where I was election night, to Youngstown and other communities here in Cleveland, all I'm hearing about are about school board races, about, you know, library levies that passed. People don't like the policies of the State House, and they really are longing for change. I can't say enough. We've had record crowds showing up. We've set records in fundraising 3 quarters in a row. And I am not a career politician. You know, I'm a career public servant and a doctor and a mom. And the interesting number we have is we had a record number of donors. We've had more donors in the first half of this year than most candidates ever see statewide in 2 years running. We are seeing a groundswell from every county, and this is small dollar too. It's people who are wanting change. And I can't say enough. I'm thrilled about what we're seeing and what we're going to be able to do in this election. And obviously, there's been a lot of polling done as well. We now know the latest polling has us a point ahead of Vivek Ramaswamy. We're actually beating him by 19 points in a Bowling Green poll. In independents, and a poll teachers did, we are plus 21. He's underwater 14 points with independents. I see that people are longing for something different, and I can't say enough. I'm honored and privileged to have served this state, and I will be so privileged as to serve it again.
Now, right now, you are the only declared Democratic candidate for
Yes.
the governor office in the state of Ohio. There have been rumblings that someone like former U.S. Representative Tim Ryan may enter the race. Does that impact the campaign that you've been running up to this point?
No, well, it's certainly not up to this point. And, I can't speak to what Tim Ryan would do, but I can tell you, the numbers are very favorable in this campaign as well. And I'm just staying very, very focused on my opponent, Mr. Ramaswamy, and the people who I believe in October of 26 are going to help me tell him, you cannot buy the state, you cannot buy Ohio, and you can't buy us.
Let's look ahead to that election next year in 2026. Final question for you as we wrap things up today. The government shutdown was top of mind for voters this November. Last year, it was immigration and the economy. And we mentioned, the Sherrod Brown race. Every anti-Sherrod Brown ad was focused on anti-transgender issues. What do you think will be the most pressing issue that voters will care about a year from now?
I believe, just as they do now, costs are top of mind on everything, affordability. And you know what? I've shared a lot about this saying that a whole generation of young people all over this country that are Gen Alpha, they're middle schoolers right now, have a new slang saying that is so Ohio. And it doesn't mean something good as we can imagine. It means cringy and weird and backwards. This is a legacy that has come to us by a dysfunctional state house for many, many years that has not been working for Ohioans. We have a candidate that is not going to be working on the policies that I believe Ohioans are longing for us to work on. I will be fighting every day, not just to stop the bad things that have been happening, and they've been many, but we can actually dream of good things again. I think we've been living in a please don't do more harm, while everyday Ohioans are just trying to make ends meet. They're doing everything right. My opponent says people are struggling because they're lazy, they're mediocre, they're not working hard enough. That is absolutely not the Ohioans I meet every day. And as a person who knows what it feels like to have struggled in life and had the good fortune of people not looking the other way, at that eventually being able to be removed from bad things, I think we're living through a time where all of us are being asked to have a little more courage. All of us are being asked to stand up against these bad actors. And I believe what we're doing at actonforgovernor.com, we are literally bringing Ohioans together. We do these Zooms once a month where we huddle. We give you great ideas of what you can be doing to not look the other way in your own community, because together, I believe Ohioans are going to push back on this, and they're going to say, you can't buy this state. We want to live in a state where everyone feels welcome, where everyone belongs, and we can have nice things. Like, we literally in this state are on the verge of being able to be the largest integrated park system in this country. We've been cleaning up the Great Lake. We've been cleaning up our rivers. We have bike trails, and I drive a Jeep trails everywhere in this state. The Ohio River just became a designated national water trail. But literally, we can actually dream of things like that kind of quality of life again, where we can take all our assets, and that is a huge economic driver for us to have something like that. So look, I'm going to reduce costs. That is the first thing I will be going in every way, whether it's energy or healthcare costs, what we can do with housing, what we can do with energy, all of it. But I also want us to know that we should actually expect of our leaders to deliver great things again. And I'll fight tirelessly every step of this way.
Dr. Acton, thank you very much for your time, Democratic candidate for the Ohio governorship.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Stephanie. Thank you.
Again, that was Dr. Amy Acton. We will keep you posted on our attempts to interview the leading GOP candidate, Vivek Ramaswamy. Now, to get the last word on today's topics, you can email us at soi@ideastream.org, and you can find us on Instagram. We're at The Sound of Ideas. Yesterday, we talked about childhood vaccine rates dropping in Ohio, and we talked with a group of grandparents who are hoping to reverse that trend. Jeff from Moreland Hills emailed in and said, "In the era of social media and conspiracy theories, the problem is how to address fear, suspicion, and the increasing distrust of science and expertise. Trust is gained in teaspoons, but lost in buckets." Thank you very much for sharing that with us, Jeff. We also got an email from Claudia from Kent who said, "I went to elementary school into the 50s. I remember a spirit of elation that we, society, had finally achieved a means of preventing serious contagious diseases to protect children from dying. Everyone was on board, a very different perspective from now." Claudia, thank you for sharing your perspective with us. Now, tomorrow on The Sound of Ideas, we'll look at the growing popularity of veganism in the Cleveland food scene in our recurring segment, The Menu, in partnership with Cleveland Magazine. Plus, we'll hear from the creative team behind the Netflix series Death by Lightning. That's a series on the life and assassination of President James Garfield, who was from Ohio. Now, if you missed any part of today's show, there'll be a rebroadcast tonight at 9 p.m. on 89.7 FM WKSU. You can also listen to The Sound of Ideas wherever you get your podcasts, and you can find us on the IdeaStream Public Media YouTube page. Just search for The Sound of Ideas podcast playlist, and you can find all of our full episodes and clip-outs there. I'm Stephanie Haney. Thank you very much for keeping the conversation going. We'll see you back here tomorrow here on The Sound of Ideas.